Ethan had been on the road for many days, traveling across dry fields, long roads, and quiet valleys. He was a cowboy who mostly kept to himself. He helped people when he could, worked small jobs along the way, and moved forward whenever he felt the world calling him somewhere new. That morning, he reached a small town that looked peaceful from a distance. It had only a few shops, some old wooden houses, and a main road where dust lifted with every passing step. Ethan was tired, hungry, and in need of a little rest, so he guided his horse to the local repair shop, thinking he might find someone who could help with a small issue with his saddle. The town felt sleepy. The air was warm, and the sun sat high above the roofs. Ethan noticed that there weren't many people around. A few walked by slowly, some stood outside stores talking, and others watched him with quiet curiosity. Cowboys didn't visit this town often. Ethan didn't mind the attention. He just nodded politely and kept walking toward the repair shop. A wooden sign above the door showed chipped paint, and the windows were dusty, but he figured the place would be good enough for what he needed. The door was unlocked, but when he pushed it open, the shop was empty. There was no voice calling out, no worker in sight, only the smell of old tools and machine oil in the air. Ethan stepped inside and tapped on the counter. "Hello?" he called out, but no answer came. He waited a moment, thinking the owner might return soon. As he stood there, he noticed a small door in the back that led outside toward an old warehouse. The door was slightly open, swinging a little in the warm wind. Ethan hesitated for a second. It wasn't his habit to walk into places uninvited, but something felt unusual. Maybe someone was working in the back and didn't hear him. Maybe the warehouse was part of the shop. Maybe the owner was there. With those thoughts, Ethan stepped toward the back door and pushed it open gently. Behind the repair shop stood a large, weathered warehouse made of metal sheets and old wooden beams. It looked abandoned at first glance, but the side door was open just enough for a person to slip through. Ethan approached slowly, unsure of what he would find. As he got closer, he heard a sound, a soft, faint sound, almost like someone whispering. He stopped walking and listened again. The voice came again, weak and trembling. It sounded like someone calling for help, but too tired to speak loudly. Ethan's heart tightened. He wasn't the kind of man who ignored a cry like that. Without rushing, but with purpose in his steps, he pushed the warehouse door open and stepped inside. The light inside was dim. Dust floated in the air, and old tools lay scattered around. Boxes were stacked in corners, and the smell of rust filled the space. For a moment, Ethan saw nothing but shadows. Then he heard the voice again, clearer this time. "Please, someone, help." He turned toward the sound. In the far corner of the warehouse, he saw a young woman sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Her clothes were dusty, her hair tangled, and she looked tired beyond measure. Her hands were held down by a metal chain attached to a ring in the wall. The chain wasn't tight, but it kept her from standing or moving more than a little. She wasn't hurt, but she looked exhausted and scared. Ethan approached slowly, raising his hands a little to show he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said softly. "I'm not here to scare you. I heard your voice. Are you all right?" The young woman looked up, her eyes tired but relieved. "Please, can you help me? I've been stuck here for days. I don't know what to do." Ethan kneeled a few steps away to give her space. He didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. "What happened? Who put you here?" he asked gently. Her name was Mara. She spoke in a voice that shook every now and then. She told him she came to this town a few weeks ago because someone promised her a job. She thought she would find a fresh start here, but things went wrong. The people she trusted said she owed them money for her travel and her stay, even though she never agreed to such things. They kept increasing the amount and kept her from leaving until she paid them back. She insisted she never agreed to anything unfair, but they wouldn't listen. One day they brought her to this warehouse and left her there, promising to release her when she paid everything they demanded. Ethan listened without interrupting. He could hear the honesty in her voice. She wasn't making up stories. She wasn't hiding anything. She was simply someone who trusted the wrong people and fell into a situation she couldn't escape. He asked if she had family nearby, someone who might be looking for her or someone who could help. She shook her head. She had left her home in search of work and didn't have anyone close in this town or anywhere nearby. The people who kept her there hadn't hurt her, but they kept her in fear. She had food and water only when they remembered to bring it. She didn't know when they would return or if they even planned to. Ethan felt a deep sadness for her. He had met many people in his travels, and he knew how harsh the world could be, especially for someone alone and without support. He looked at the chain. It wasn't thick, but it was locked tightly. He checked the lock and the wall. It would take a tool or the key to open it safely. Ethan wanted to help her, and he knew he needed to act carefully so he didn't make matters worse. "Don't worry," he said, his voice steady. "You're not alone anymore. I'll figure this out." Mara nodded, but he could see fear still in her eyes. She didn't know Ethan. She didn't know if he truly intended to help, but something in his tone made her trust him a little. Ethan stood up and walked around the warehouse to look for clues, signs of who brought her there and how often they returned. He found old tools, scraps of paper, and some empty containers, but nothing that clearly showed when someone might come back. He walked outside and looked around the repair shop. Whoever kept her in the warehouse clearly had access to the shop. They were likely connected. He returned to Mara. "Do they come here often?" he asked. "Not every day," she said. "Sometimes they come in the morning, sometimes late at night. I never know." Ethan knew he had limited time. Someone could return at any moment. He didn't want to leave her alone again, not after everything she'd gone through. "I'm going to help you," he said again. Mara looked at him with a mix of hope and fear. "Please, just don't leave me here," she whispered. "I won't," Ethan promised. He sat near her, not too close, but close enough so she felt safe. He asked her small questions, like whether she had eaten, if she needed water, and how long she'd been there. He listened to her story carefully, understanding how things had gone wrong for her. Outside, the sun began to lower a little. The wind grew softer. The quiet town felt even quieter around the warehouse. Ethan knew the situation was delicate. He wanted to help Mara leave safely without causing anyone harm or creating a bigger problem that could circle back to her later. But one thing was clear. She needed someone to stand up for her. And Ethan decided that someone would be him. He didn't know the people who kept her there. He didn't know how they would react. But he did know this. No one deserved to be left alone, frightened and unable to walk away from a situation they didn't choose. As he sat there in the dim warehouse, Ethan felt something rise inside him, a simple but powerful sense of responsibility. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a lawman. He wasn't even a local. He was just a traveler passing through. But sometimes, life places a person in the right moment for a reason. And Ethan decided he wouldn't walk away from this moment. Ethan stayed near Mara, trying to understand everything she had been through. The dim warehouse was quiet, but his mind was filled with questions. He didn't want to push her too hard, but he needed to know enough to help her. Mara sat with her back against the cold wall, the chain resting loosely on her wrist. She looked tired, scared, and unsure of what would happen next. Ethan spoke softly, trying to make her feel safe. "Tell me whatever you can. I want to help, but I need to understand your story." Mara nodded slowly. Her voice was weak, but clear enough. "I came here because I thought I found work. A man in another town told me there were good jobs here. I trusted him. I thought nothing bad would happen." She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. But when I reached here, things changed. The people who brought me said I owed them money. They said I had to pay for the room they gave me and for the food they offered. I tried to explain that I never agreed to that, but they didn't listen. Ethan listened without interrupting. He didn't want to rush her. Mara continued, her eyes lowered. At first, they were polite. They said everything would be fine if I just helped them with some small tasks. But each day they added more and more rules. They took my phone, told me to stay inside the room they gave me, and said I couldn't leave until the money was paid. I thought maybe they were strict, but not dangerous. I still believed things would get better. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if remembering something painful. Then one day, they brought me here. They said it was only for a short time, but days passed. I tried to ask why I couldn't go outside, but they didn't explain. They just said I needed to wait. I didn't understand why they were doing this. I didn't owe them anything. I just wanted a job and a chance to start fresh. Ethan let out a slow breath. He had seen many forms of dishonesty in his travels. But hearing Mara's words made him angry inside, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, protective way. He kept his face calm so she wouldn't feel more worried. "Have they ever hurt you?" Ethan asked carefully. "No," she answered immediately. "They didn't hurt me. They just kept me here. They didn't want me to run away before I paid. But I didn't even know why I was supposed to pay anything. I didn't do anything wrong." Ethan nodded. He understood now that the situation, while not violent, was deeply unfair. Keeping someone trapped in fear was still wrong, even if they didn't use force. He looked around the warehouse again and tried to imagine the kind of people who would leave someone in a place like this. He wanted to know who he would be dealing with. "Do you know their names?" he asked. "I only know one name," Mara said. "Brent. He's the one who talks the most. The other men rarely speak. They just bring things and leave." Ethan recognized the name instantly, the repair shop owner. He had wondered earlier why the shop was empty. Now everything made sense. Whoever was behind this kept the warehouse close to their business, so they could check on Mara easily without being noticed. Ethan rubbed his thumb against the handle of his holster. Not because he planned anything dangerous, but because it was a habit he had when he needed to think clearly. He wasn't a man who solved problems with force. He believed words could reach places fists never could. But he also believed in standing firm when right and wrong were clear. "All right," he said calmly. "You're not going to stay here any longer than necessary. I'll figure out what to do next." Mara stared at him with uncertainty. She wanted to believe him, but she didn't want false hope. She had already been disappointed too many times. "What if they come back before you can help?" she asked, her voice trembling just a little. Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving this place until you're safe. If someone comes, I'll handle it. You're not alone anymore." Mara slowly nodded. She watched him as he stood up and walked around the warehouse with careful steps. He checked old shelves, looked behind boxes, and examined the rusty tools left around. He wasn't searching for trouble. He was searching for information. Every clue helped him understand the men he would soon speak to. He found a small table with papers thrown on it. Most were old receipts, nothing important. But one paper caught his eye, a list of names with numbers next to them. Ethan picked it up. The names were written quickly, and the numbers looked like amounts of money. He didn't know what it meant, but one thing was clear. Mara's situation wasn't unique. There were others, too. That made Ethan even more determined. He returned to her side. "I need you to stay calm," he said gently. "I'll talk to the person who brought you here, but I need to do it in the right way." Mara swallowed hard. "Please be careful. They don't like people asking questions." Ethan gave a half smile, soft but steady. "I've asked questions in many places. I'll be all right." The way he spoke made Mara feel something she hadn't felt in days: hope. She didn't dare smile, but her shoulders relaxed slightly. She believed him more now. Something about Ethan made her feel that he wasn't the kind of man who stepped back once he decided to help someone. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the cracks in the warehouse walls, creating thin golden lines on the dusty floor. Outside, the town remained quiet. Ethan's horse waited peacefully near the repair shop, unaware of the tension building inside the warehouse. Ethan sat down again, closer this time. "I need to ask you something important," he said. "When Brent or the others come here, do they always come through the front shop?" "Yes," Mara said. "They always come through the repair shop. They never use the back entrance." That was useful information. Ethan now knew which direction they would come from and how much time he might have to react. He also now knew that he didn't need to go searching all over town. Everything he needed was right here. He asked Mara about her life before coming to this town, not because it was necessary for the situation, but because talking helped her relax. She told him about her home, her hopes, and her wish to build a better life. Ethan listened with genuine attention, showing no sign of judgment or impatience. He understood how a person's circumstances could bring them to new places, trusting strangers because they wanted something better. As Mara talked, Ethan realized something else. She had strength inside her. Even though she had been afraid, she had held on for days without giving up. She had called for help whenever she sensed even the slightest chance. That was courage. Quiet, steady courage. Ethan stood up again and stretched his back. He had been sitting too long, and the stiffness reminded him he had traveled for days before arriving here. He looked outside through a small opening in the warehouse wall. The sunlight had shifted. Time was moving, and he needed to be ready. "This won't go on much longer," he said softly. "When Brent comes, I'll talk to him." Mara's eyes widened slightly. "What will you say?" "Whatever I need to say," Ethan replied. "But I won't shout, and I won't fight. I'll speak with calm and reason. Sometimes people listen better when you don't challenge them with anger." Mara took a slow breath. She wanted to trust his plan. "Do you think he'll listen?" "I think," Ethan said, "that everyone listens when you make your intentions clear, and my intention is simple. You will not stay here." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried strength that made Mara feel as if the walls around her were no longer closing in. She felt warmth in her chest, the first signs of hope returning. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The quiet stretched on. Ethan used that time to look around outside, but always stayed close enough to return to Mara within seconds. He didn't want her to feel alone even for a moment. He made sure she had water and helped her stretch her legs as much as the chain allowed. Then he heard footsteps outside, the heavy kind that belonged to someone who worked with tools all day. Ethan looked toward the entrance. The moment had come sooner than he expected. Mara's breath caught. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'm here," he whispered. He stood up, steady and calm, ready to face whoever entered the warehouse. He didn't know what the conversation would bring, but he was prepared. He wasn't afraid. He knew what was right, and he knew why he was there. And for the first time since she arrived in that town, Mara believed, truly believed, that she might walk out of that warehouse one day as a free person. Ethan stood silently as the footsteps grew louder. The sound echoed through the empty warehouse, each step slow and heavy, like someone who wasn't in a hurry but also wasn't expecting company. Mara held her breath, her eyes fixed fearfully on the entrance. She didn't know what Brent would do when he found Ethan there. She had seen him react unpredictably in the past, not with violence, but with irritation and pressure that made her feel trapped. The warehouse door creaked open, letting in a beam of light that cut across the dusty floor. Brent stepped inside, wiping sweat from his forehead with a cloth. He looked tired, like a man who had been working since sunrise. At first, he didn't notice Ethan. He tossed the cloth on a bench, stretched his back, and muttered something to himself about the heat. Then his eyes landed on Ethan. Brent froze. Ethan didn't move. He kept his posture relaxed, his expression neutral. Everything about him was calm, steady, and controlled. He didn't want to startle Brent or make him feel attacked. That would only make things harder for Mara. Brent blinked, confused. Who are you?" he asked, taking a few cautious steps forward. Ethan nodded politely. "Name's Ethan. I came into your shop earlier looking for the owner. No one was there. So I walked around and heard someone calling for help." Brent's eyes flickered nervously toward Mara. In that quick glance, Ethan saw everything: the guilt, the fear of being confronted, and the uncertainty of what to say. Brent forced a crooked smile. "She's fine. You shouldn't be back here. This is private property." Ethan took a slow step forward, not threatening, just making his presence clear. "I didn't come here to cause trouble. I only want to understand why she's chained." Mara kept silent, too afraid to speak. Ethan glanced at her, then back at Brent. Brent rubbed the back of his neck. It's a debt matter," he said quickly. "She owes us money. We're keeping her here until she pays back what she owes. She knows that." Ethan felt anger rise inside him, but he kept his voice controlled. "She told me she never agreed to anything like that. She came here for work, and now she's being kept against her will. That's not a debt. That's wrong." Brent stiffened. No one in town usually challenged him. People came to him for repairs, and he liked to be seen as someone in control. But Ethan wasn't from this town, and he didn't seem intimidated by Brent's presence. Still, Brent tried to defend himself. "Look, mister, I don't want any issues. You don't understand the situation. She hasn't paid her part. We took her in, gave her shelter, gave her food." Ethan raised a hand gently, stopping him. "And that gives you the right to chain her to a wall?" Brent's mouth opened, but he found no answer. He looked briefly at Mara again, then looked down at the floor. Ethan could see that Brent wasn't a cruel man. He was someone who made bad choices, followed the wrong advice, and acted out of fear and control rather than reason. Still, the result was the same. Mara had suffered because of those choices. Ethan took a slow breath and spoke calmly, his voice even softer than before. "Listen, I'm not here to argue or threaten you. I don't want to cause trouble for your shop or your life. I just want her free." Brent frowned. "It's not that simple." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Brent hesitated. He looked around the warehouse as if hoping the walls would give him an answer. Then finally he sighed. "Because I already told someone else that she was staying. If I suddenly release her, they'll ask questions, and I don't want anyone accusing me of lying." "Who?" Ethan asked. "Just someone who helps arrange workers," Brent said vaguely. "It's complicated." Ethan stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough so Brent had no choice but to look him directly in the eyes. "Then let's make it simple." Brent swallowed. "How?" Ethan's voice steadied, carrying a weight that couldn't be ignored. "Tell me who I pay to set her free." Brent stared at him, stunned. He wasn't expecting that. He had probably imagined Ethan shouting or calling the sheriff or making threats. But Ethan offered a peaceful path, a clean solution, a way for everyone to walk away without chaos. Mara stared at Ethan with wide eyes. She didn't expect those words either. Something warm spread through her chest, like hope she had forgotten she could feel. Brent wiped his palms on his jeans nervously. You want to pay? Why would you pay for someone you don't even know?" Ethan shrugged lightly. "Because she deserves to be free, and because doing the right thing matters more than knowing someone." Brent didn't know how to respond. He stepped away, pacing slowly, thinking. Ethan let him breathe. Pushing too hard would only make the man defensive. After a few moments, Brent stopped and turned back. "It's not really about money," he said finally. It's just, someone told me she had to pay for staying. I thought I was helping keep things fair. I didn't think about how it must feel for her. Ethan nodded. Then let's fix it. Brent hesitated again. He wasn't a bad man, Ethan could see that. But people sometimes make unwise decisions because they are afraid or confused. Brent was both. Finally, Brent let out a long sigh. All right, let me call the person I talked to. Maybe we can settle this. Ethan stayed completely calm. Good. I'll wait right here. Brent walked toward the warehouse exit, pulling out his phone. Before he stepped outside, he paused and looked back at Mara. His face wasn't cold anymore. It was softer, almost regretful. I didn't mean to cause you trouble, he muttered. Mara didn't respond. She didn't know what to say, but she didn't look away either. Once Brent was outside, Ethan turned to Mara. How are you feeling? Mara's shoulders loosened just a little. I don't know, she whispered. Hopeful, scared, both. Ethan gave her a gentle smile. That's normal. Everything's moving fast. But stay calm. We're close. Then they waited. Time moved slowly, each second stretching into a long breath. Outside, Ethan could hear Brent speaking in a low voice. He couldn't hear the words, but Brent sounded nervous, maybe even apologetic. Minutes passed. Mara's breathing steadied. She watched Ethan, trusting him more with each passing moment. She had never met someone who fought for her without expecting anything in return. That alone made him feel like a miracle. Soon, Brent walked back inside, looking unsettled but determined. Well? Ethan asked. Brent nodded weakly. He said, if you want her to go, then it's your responsibility. No more questions, no more claims. And what do I owe? Ethan asked calmly. Brent lowered his eyes. He said whatever you can give. It doesn't matter. He just wants it settled. Ethan reached into his saddlebag and pulled out some money. Nothing excessive, just enough to close the matter peacefully. He placed it gently in Brent's hand. Brent stared at it, almost ashamed. You don't have to. I know, Ethan said softly. But this lets everyone move on. Brent nodded, voice stuck in his throat. He walked to Mara and slowly pulled out the small iron key. His fingers trembled slightly as he placed it in the lock. The chain clicked open. Mara's breath caught. For the first time in days, her wrist was free. Brent stepped back. You can go, he said quietly. Mara looked at Ethan, tears forming in her eyes. Not loud tears, just quiet ones that expressed everything she couldn't say with words. Ethan nodded. Let's get you out of here. Together they walked toward the warehouse exit, Mara stepping into the open air as a free person for the first time since she arrived in that town. And Ethan walked beside her knowing the hardest part was still ahead, but also knowing that he would face whatever came next with the same calm strength that brought them this far. The next morning began with a quiet, warm sunrise spreading across the wide land. The sky slowly turned from soft purple to a gentle orange, and the cool air carried the light smell of early grass. Amelia opened her eyes and found herself in a small, comfortable room inside the ranch house. The blanket was soft, the pillow was light under her head, and for the first time in many days, she felt safe. It took her a few seconds to remember where she was, and when she finally did, she sat up with a deep breath. She was free, and she was among good people. She heard footsteps outside the room and then a gentle knock. It was Rosa, the housekeeper who had given her warm soup the night before. Rosa smiled as she opened the door and said, "Good morning, dear. You must be hungry. Breakfast is ready." Her voice was soft, full of kindness, and it made Amelia feel as if she had stepped into a home she never knew she needed. Rosa didn't ask any heavy questions. She didn't treat Amelia like someone lost or weak. She just showed care in a simple way, offering warmth without forcing words. Amelia followed her to the small dining room. The wooden chairs and the long table made the place feel peaceful. A pot of tea was already steaming, and plates of fresh bread and eggs were set neatly. Amelia sat down, and for a moment, she simply stared at the food. After days of worry, hunger, and confusion, the sight of a simple breakfast felt like a reminder that life could still be gentle. Before she could take her first bite, she heard another set of footsteps, slower and heavier than Rose's. It was the cowboy, Ethan, walking in. His hat was in his hand, and he looked slightly embarrassed to see her already awake. He nodded awkwardly, as if unsure what to say. "Morning," he quietly offered. Amelia returned the greeting with a small smile. Ethan sat across from her, pouring himself tea. He didn't stare at her or make her feel uncomfortable. He spoke only when he felt she was ready. "I hope you slept well," he said, still looking at his cup rather than her face. "I did. Thank you," she replied. "Good," he said simply, as though that one word carried more meaning than a long speech. It sounded like he was relieved, but also careful not to push her. Rosa joined them for a moment, placing a bowl of fruit on the table. "Eat as much as you want. No one here will rush you," she said kindly. Then she stepped away to finish her morning work. There was a gentle silence between Amelia and Ethan. Not an awkward one, just quiet, respectful, peaceful. Amelia sensed that he was trying to give her space, but she also felt the need to acknowledge everything he had done. She took a small breath and finally said, "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan looked up, surprised by her voice. "You don't have to," he said. "You needed help, that's all." "It means a lot," she insisted softly. "You didn't even know me." Sometimes we don't need history to do what feels right. The way he said it made Amelia feel lighter, as if the burden she carried was slowly easing off her shoulders. She took another bite of bread and found that her hands had stopped shaking. She wasn't completely fine yet, but she was safe enough to breathe fully again. After breakfast, Ethan stood up and adjusted his sleeves. "I'll be outside if you need anything," he said. "You don't have to stay in the house all day. Walk around if you want. No one here will bother you." "Thank you," Amelia said. He nodded again and walked outside, disappearing through the back door that led to the open land. Amelia finished eating and then stepped outside the house. The ranch was larger than she imagined. Wide open fields stretched far, dotted with strong trees and grazing horses. The breeze brushed softly against her hair, and the fresh air felt like a gentle welcome. She took slow steps toward the fence where a few horses were standing. They were calm and elegant, their coats shining in the sunlight. One horse, a brown one with a white patch on its forehead, walked closer to her. Amelia paused, unsure if she should move, but the horse leaned in with quiet trust. She raised her hand and touched its warm nose. It was the first time in days she felt something simple and peaceful, something that didn't carry fear or worry. As she stood there, Ethan approached from the other side of the fence. "That's Aspen," he said. "She likes meeting new people." Amelia smiled gently. "She's beautiful." Ethan leaned against the fence, watching the horse with calm eyes. "She recognizes kindness," he said. "Animals can tell these things better than people sometimes." Amelia felt a small warmth in her chest at his words. She wasn't used to compliments or gentle observations. For a long time, she had lived under pressure and silence. Now she was slowly learning how to accept simple kindness. They walked along the fence together. Ethan kept a respectful distance, making sure she didn't feel uncomfortable. He showed her the barn, the open field where cattle roamed, and a small lake nearby that reflected the sky like a mirror. As they reached the lake, Amelia stopped to look at the clear water. It was so still, so quiet, that she could see her reflection. She realized how tired she looked, yet there was a softness returning to her face. A softness she thought she had lost forever. "You don't have to tell me anything," Ethan said gently. "But if you want to talk, I'll listen." Amelia took a deep breath. She wasn't ready to share everything, but she appreciated his patience. "Maybe someday," she murmured. "That's enough," he said. They walked back slowly. On the way, Amelia noticed small details she had missed earlier. Flowers growing near the barn, birds resting on the posts, the way the sunlight made everything look warm and alive. Little things, simple things. But to her, they felt like signs that she was stepping into a new beginning. Later in the afternoon, Rosa brought her a light lunch and sat beside her for a while. She didn't ask complicated questions. Instead, she told Amelia small stories about the ranch, how Ethan had grown up here, how he worked hard to keep the place running, how the people around respected him because he always helped others quietly. Amelia listened, and slowly her heart began to relax. She felt as if she was learning about a world that had room for gentleness and hope. Near evening, Ethan knocked on the open doorway and asked if she wanted to join him for a short walk toward the west side of the ranch. Amelia agreed. The sunset was bright and colorful, painting the sky with shades of gold and soft pink. As they walked, Amelia noticed how calmly Ethan moved. Steady, thoughtful, not rushing. His presence made her feel grounded. They reached a small hill where the view of the ranch was wide and beautiful. Amelia stood there in silence, letting the wind brush against her face. For the first time in many days, she felt a sense of peace that stayed longer than a moment. Ethan stood beside her quietly. After a while, he said, "Whatever you choose to do next, you won't face it alone. Not anymore." Amelia didn't answer immediately. She let his words settle inside her heart, filling the spaces where fear once lived. She felt a soft, quiet strength rising, enough strength to look at the future without trembling. When they walked back to the house, the stars had begun to appear one by one, glowing softly above them. The world felt calm. The night felt safe. And Amelia realized something she had forgotten for a long time. Sometimes the people who step into our lives unexpectedly are the ones who help us rebuild a better version of ourselves. The next morning came with a soft glow that gently filled the ranch house. Amelia woke up feeling lighter than she had in a long time. For days she had woken up with fear in her chest, but today felt different. She sat up slowly and looked out the window. The sky was bright, clear, and calm. Birds were singing softly from the trees, and the long grass outside moved with the morning breeze as if greeting her. She got out of bed and stepped into the small living room. Rosa was already there, arranging fresh flowers in a vase on the table. When she saw Amelia, her face warmed with a caring smile. "Good morning, dear. I made tea for you," Rosa said, pointing to the kettle on the counter. Amelia thanked her. Her voice was steadier, stronger. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat near the window. The warmth of the cup felt comforting in her hands. She watched the horses running across the open field, their steps light and free. For the first time, she felt like she, too, might be able to move freely again. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps. Ethan entered the room, wearing his hat and boots, ready for the day's work. He greeted her with a small nod, gentle, respectful, never pushing her for conversation. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. He looked at her for a second, noticing the calmness she carried today. "You slept well?" he asked. "Yes," she said with a small smile. "Better than before." "I'm glad," Ethan said, and though he didn't smile fully, the softness in his eyes showed that he meant it. After breakfast, Ethan headed out to the barn. Amelia watched him leave through the window. Something inside her told her she wanted to help. She wanted to feel useful again, to be part of something instead of sitting quietly with her thoughts. So after a moment of hesitation, she walked outside and followed the path to the barn. Ethan was feeding the horses when she arrived. He looked surprised to see her there, but not uncomfortable. "You didn't have to come outside," he said. "I wanted to," she said softly. "Can I help you with something?" He looked at her carefully, making sure she wasn't forcing herself. "Only if you feel ready." "I do," she said. Ethan nodded and handed her a small bucket of water. "You can help me with Aspen," he said. The brown horse with the white patch recognized Amelia instantly and walked toward her. Amelia smiled and poured the water into Aspen's bowl. The horse nudged her gently, and Amelia reached out to stroke its neck. With every small task, Amelia felt her confidence return. She brushed Aspen's coat, arranged hay in the stall, and watched Ethan work with a calm rhythm. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were easy and steady, like he wanted to make sure she never felt pressured. "You're doing well," he said at one point. "That means a lot," Amelia said. "I wasn't sure I could be helpful." "You're more helpful than you think," he said. Those simple words touched her more deeply than he realized. For a long time, she had felt like she wasn't good at anything. Now, for the first time in a while, she felt capable again. They worked together until noon. After that, Ethan walked her back to the house for lunch. Rosa had prepared a light meal, and they all sat at the table. The atmosphere was gentle and warm, filled with small moments that made the day feel almost normal. After lunch, Amelia stepped outside again and wandered toward the lake. The water sparkled under the sunlight, and the breeze was cool against her face. She sat down on the soft grass, hugging her knees gently. Even though she was in a safe place, her mind still carried questions. She knew she had to make decisions about her future. She couldn't stay at the ranch forever. At least, not without telling Ethan and Rosa what she planned. But she also wasn't ready to return to her old life. The thought of going back made her chest tighten. She needed time, and she needed strength. As she sat there thinking, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Ethan approaching. He didn't sit too close, giving her space. "You're all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "just thinking." "About what?" he asked, but his voice stayed gentle, giving her the chance not to answer if she didn't want to. "About what I'm supposed to do next," she said honestly. "I don't want to run from life forever." "You don't have to decide everything today," Ethan said. "Sometimes it's enough to just breathe through one day at a time." Amelia looked at the lake again. His words were simple, but they made sense. "I'm scared of choosing wrong," she admitted. "Everyone is," Ethan said quietly. "Every good choice usually begins with a little fear. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Amelia let those words sit in her heart. For a long time, she had believed fear meant she wasn't strong enough. But Ethan saw it differently. He made her see that fear didn't erase her courage. It only made her journey more meaningful. They stayed by the lake until the sun began to lower. The sky slowly changed color, turning from blue to soft orange. Amelia stood up and brushed grass off her dress. Ethan offered his hand, not to pull her, not to lead her, but simply to steady her if she needed it. She didn't hesitate this time. She placed her hand in his, and he helped her climb the small slope back toward the ranch path. His hand was steady, warm, and respectful. When they reached the top, she gently let go, feeling stronger than before. That evening, Amelia sat with Rosa in the living room. Rosa was sewing something, her hands moving with practiced ease. Amelia watched her for a moment before speaking. "Rosa, thank you for everything." Rosa paused her stitching and looked up with soft eyes. "You don't have to thank me, dear. Kindness doesn't need payment." "But you have done so much," Amelia said. "You made me feel safe." Rosa smiled. "Sometimes people just need a place where they can remember who they are. That's all." Amelia felt her eyes warm. She wasn't crying, but she felt emotional in a peaceful way. Later at night, Amelia stepped outside again. The stars were bright across the sky. She walked a little farther onto the open land, feeling the cool night air around her. She felt small standing under the great sky, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel lost. She heard soft footsteps behind her, Ethan again. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I just wanted some air," she said. He nodded and stood beside her. The silence between them felt warm, not empty. "Ethan, may I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why did you help me that day? You didn't even know who I was." Ethan looked at the sky for a moment before answering. "Because no one should feel alone when they need help. And because I could see in your eyes that you hadn't given up. You were tired, afraid, but you were still holding on. That's the kind of person worth helping." Amelia looked down at her hands, touched by his sincerity. She felt a small wave of courage rise inside her. "Then, can I stay here a little longer? Just until I figure things out?" Ethan turned to her. His expression softened. "You can stay as long as you need. This place is open to you." Amelia felt a long breath leave her chest. Relief washed over her like a warm breeze. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're safe here," Ethan said. "Always." They stood quietly under the stars for a little while longer. The world around them was still and peaceful. Amelia felt something deep inside her shift, a quiet strength beginning to grow again. Maybe life had taken her through darkness, but now she had found a place that felt like sunrise. And she wasn't alone anymore.